economy is doing okay.
Yeah.
Even though people have a hard time telling,
Awesome. Okay, fantastic. So let's have a conversation. Sridhar, thank you so much for making the time. We are right in the heart of the Silicon Valley. It's always, I think it's very important to talk about data. You are a veteran in the field. You have a wealth of knowledge about it. Before we dive into it, how are you feeling about the market? How are you feeling? There was a little bit of slump. There were a little bit of, layoffs and all of that happening. Everyone be panicking in the industry. But how are we bouncing back? I think after November, I'm seeing that.
I think the economy is doing okay.
Yeah.
Even though people have a hard time telling, is inflation really peaked, and will the interest rates, have they peaked? Will it begin to come down? So I would say there is cautious optimism regarding the economy. I think this is a pretty tough year for startups. There was an article this morning in the New York Times about how many startups are shutting down. Basically, the difference in how you can operate in a 0% interest rate environment versus a 5% interest rate environment is massive for startups. So I think that is continuing to go on. I think some of the excitement around AI and what that technology can do is actually making people believe that everything is fine with startups. Yes, those companies are raising a lot of money, but I think quickly there'll also be a time for them where they have to show the business value of what they are doing. So I'd say it's actually a pretty tough environment for startups, and I see the current excitement and ease of being able to raise in AI very much as a, I would give it at most an 18-month window.
Yeah, no, actually, I was speaking with a startup founder a couple of days back, and I was scared for my life because the environment is a little bit tough on the startup ecosystem.
All of a sudden, things have gone to you'll be judged at 10 to 15 times your revenue.
Yeah,
it's like a completely different world from 3 years ago.
Yeah, and especially in the Gen AI market, which is a very, very new market, especially the hype cycle is kind of dying down, and now people are talking about productizing production of it, and they want to see results the same way they want to see results in the startups as well. Let's talk about Snowflake a little bit. Let's talk about what they have been doing. Snowflake enables data.
It's the ultimate data platform.
Yeah, it's the ultimate data platform. All the data-driven professionals that work in right from data analytics to ML professionals work on this platform. Since Gen AI is topic, how have you kind of started to Gen AI or LLMs started to embed it into your technologies? What is happening around that?
Yeah, the core Snowflake thesis is that having a data strategy, having a data platform is a must for every enterprise. And there are companies like Fidelity where we are the system of record. This is where all data flows in. And more, this is how they do data exchange and interchange with other companies. If they need data from other companies, people used to do FTP files. Now companies say, hey, we want this to be done via data transfer. And people are also beginning to build applications on top of Snowflake. When it comes to generative AI, we worked on it from early last year. We released probably one of the best search engines that were built with AI natively early this year. So we have long experience in the area. First and foremost, I look at language models as a new, almost interaction mechanism between us and the software that we use. Remember, pretty much if you want to use a website, you have to conform to its rules.
Yeah.
You grew up in India, you know that of course we write dates differently in India than you do in the US. It's constant confusion.
My birth date changed a couple of times
exactly.
since I moved to the US.
Exactly, right? But to me, those are things that language models actually address. So it is easier to interact with software, and it's easier to get back information instead of getting a bunch of links. You can aspire to get summaries that are believable, that are cited, etc. So what we're doing at Snowflake is basically building on that. How do we make it easier for people to get at the data that is in Snowflake, to interrogate the data? So we've created a platform layer called Cortex that has semantic search, that has language models built into the Snowflake platform. Our idea is that if you want to create a chatbot on a table, you should be able to do that in minutes. If you want a more sophisticated application like a Copilot to help you generate SQL, we are sort of working on that. If you want to take these and embed them and create an application for some of your users, we want to make that possible. So we think of this as like a next logical step, as an accelerant into democratizing access to data that is in Snowflake, that is in cloud storage. And so, but this is the beginning of a journey. This is when people are beginning to build applications, but also asking questions like, okay, what's the ROI? Is this going to mean lots more queries? Like, how are we creating value? These are all great conversations.
Value is a good question to ask, and it's always a good. I mean, it's in the end.
100%. That is what creates. That's right. That's why people spend money.
One of the things about values, right, especially when it comes to the likes of an application like ChatGPT, for that matter, right, which was developed in the sense to become or achieve AGI, right. One of the things what they wanted to do was tap into almost every resource on the internet that there is. But Snowflake works in a very safe environment where the data is very
it's clean,
secure.
It's secure.
You're only using that. What's the trade-off in this, right? Essentially, or is there a trade-off, especially considering the kind of applications that you want to build for that company?
I don't think there is a trade-off. I think there is very much an aspect of making sure that language models have linguistic capabilities. That's where training on all of the internet, all of the books we can find, that stuff matters. At the end of the day, that is a language model that understands English, understands Hindi, understands German. It's like it is a base level of language understanding. Now, when you come to more of an enterprise setting, maybe you want to take one of these base models, but fine tune it on some amount of data. Maybe you're in the health area and you have a bunch of documents that are web pages that have lingo that is specific to your particular industry. To me, that's an easy add-on on top of the base models, and then you can harness the power of your data in order to enable AI applications. So to give you a simple example, when I think of a chatbot for a particular situation, I think in terms of what is going to ground the chatbot. In other words, what kind of retrieval system do you need to run? So if a user asks a question, you go back, you look at which are the authoritative sources for that question, and use the content of those pages, of those articles, in order to generate the answer. So I actually think that there is
very little trade-off.
Yeah, there's not really any kind of a trade-off. Things work pretty smoothly.
Yeah. Let's kind of walk our audience through the product, right? Some of the things that you have done during the summit this year. You kind of showed some of the enhancements and all of that. Integrating LLMs and Gen AI into data discoverability platforms kind of democratizes it for a broader use, right? Can you walk us a little bit into that, right? The journey of a user into the platform so that they can kind of sort of visualize as to what it is.
Tons of people in a company end up using Snowflake data, but let's talk about how they use it. So for example, a business user might want to know how is revenue doing within a particular. I look at a report that comes every morning of Snowflake revenue, and it's updated for for the previous day. I click on it, it goes to a Tableau dashboard. I'm like, okay, I look at some slices, but I do this like ritualistically every morning at 5 a.m. As soon as I get up. But if I want to change, okay, you know what? And it's not there in the dashboard already. I have to go find the analyst that's responsible for this dashboard and say, hey, I want this other slice, or I want this other bit of information. They in turn go figure out the SQL that is being used to populate the data in this visualization tool. They tinker with it, make sure that it goes through a QA process, and then it gets checked in. And maybe 5 days later, they're like, hey, Sridhar, this report's updated, go take a look. And that is the speed at which like data consumption and change works today. Where we want to be is instead of this, yes, perhaps I get the daily email that says this is what revenue did yesterday. But if I click on that, I get taken to more of a conversational interface where I'm able to say things like, oh, slice yesterday's revenue by our RVPs, and it generates SQL and creates that table for me. to me, it's that sort of interactivity.
Yeah.
And remember, you don't need to be a SQL expert all of a sudden in order to be able to do this. And you want to be able to short circuit the process of multiple days to create something like this. Now, this is not a replacement for analysts. They still have to do the work to bring in the data, to clean the data, to define the right views, so that then the AI models can generate SQL on the fly and produce answers. But in essence, I think that's the difference. Right now, data consumption is very stylized. Works in a certain way, change works in a certain way, and you have to conform to the rules of the game with respect to the tools that you use. Powered by generative AI, the promise is that it's a lot more fluid, it's a lot more interactive, and in an enterprise setting, it also needs to be a lot more believable. You mentioned ChatGPT. Part of the problem with it is that it hallucinates. You don't know when it's right and when it's wrong. But I think in a business setting, people are not going to tolerate that. And so these tools have to become like a lot more fail-safe. We think about creating these tools in such a way that if you don't know the answer to something, you're way better off saying, please talk to an analyst, than producing something that's fake.
Yeah.
And that's a core part of how we think about AI.
Yeah, I think that's a very crucial aspect of it, right? Hallucinations and some of the things that are going wrong. One of the questions is, right, especially considering the kind of varied data that comes in today, right? It's not just from one source or one format, right? Especially considering some of the unstructured data and the risk around it to kind of result into hallucinations or incorrect output. How does Snowflake approach that? Right? What are some of the strategies to ensure that there is capabilities within the company to be enabled to take varied, multi-pronged approach per se to approach different data formats to good.
So our CEO Frank Slootman famously said, there is no AI strategy without a data strategy. And I don't think that hard work is going to go away in terms of making sure that data is cleansed, that it is believable, that it is brought in on time from whichever systems are creating that. I honestly don't think that hard work goes away. But once that data foundation is there, what we in the AI team make sure that we do is make sure that there is a high amount of precision in everything that we do. What I mean by that is we never recommend to any of our customers, for example, that they just use a fine-tuned model out of the box, because you can't trust the output from any language model because it's not grounded in reality. It sort of makes up the best answer that it can. And so we are building semantic search into the core of Snowflake so that it can serve as essentially like a frame setting system, a retrieval system, where if you ask a question, we first retrieve the documents that are likely most relevant to your question, and then we use the contents of those documents to generate an answer. Similarly, if you ask us to generate SQL, we will generate SQL only when we are very confident that it is the right SQL. So when we do that kind of fine tuning, when we create systems like this, we place a lot of emphasis on how do you make them fail safe. It is really like this, machine learning, people call it the precision recall trade-off. I think for AI to be believable, it needs to be done in such a way that is very high precision and sort of as much recall, meaning answer as many questions as you can, but when you do answer, you better be sure you're right.
Yeah. I also want to revisit the previous question and some of the aspects that we were talking about in that question. One of the things is we want to democratize the usability of data-driven technologies as much as possible, right? But at the same time, there is a question around not understanding the core of the technology, right? So for instance, somebody building an ML model without really a basic understanding of statistics is not really something that we want to do. It's not good in so many ways, which is a whole another discussion for a topic, right? What is the kind of level of understanding after enabling features through Gen AI and LLMs are you expecting your users of Snowflake to have when building models, and how have you ensured that this safety measure of is taken care of?
I mean, look, machine learning is a whole other area, almost independent from AI and large language models. And if you want to do anything predictive, let's say you're in a company and you want to predict next year's revenue for Analytics India, you're not going to ask, you have no business asking a language model the answer to that question. You need to have a data scientist look at your data, build a model, and then actually build a predictive model for what that revenue is going to be. I think it is really important for us to understand that language models bring language capabilities. Vision models bring vision generating capabilities. There are lots and lots of things like anomaly detection or different kinds of regression models or like logistic regression predicting the probability of an event. Those are all largely orthogonal to what language models can provide. And I think those disciplines are not going away in a hurry anytime soon. Your ability to generate code for some of these at the hands of a capable programmer gets enhanced with things like Copilot. I think that stays as is. But when we do, when the data is there and we create tools in order to be able to answer questions, we very much envision that we will, essentially every chatbot will have an introduction where it will say, hey, I'm the revenue chatbot for Analytics India. I can answer these kinds of questions about revenue projections, revenue slices, but I can't really answer questions about like other areas. And I think this context setting is going to be important. And these models also, these sort of chatbots also have to be created in such a way that if they are asked a question that they have no idea about, they should refrain from generating answers. The chatbot like this should have no business answering questions about politics of India. So I think that kind of frame setting is actually going to be an important part of how we create these applications.
Fantastic, Sridhar. I think the clarity in terms of some of the things that you want to deliver and you don't want to deliver is it's a fantastic approach as well, and it's very safe. Like it's something of a conversation that we as a community should be having and are having in a lot of sense, right? In conclusion, what and as we go ahead, and this is the first time I'm seeing, Sridhar, that technology's hype has been sustained after 1 year as well. It's not dying anytime soon. I've spoken with so many leaders. They all say that we believe there is potential. It's not just a hype, but at the same time, there is another side to it as well, which kind of is ensuring that there is a safe use of the technology, plus we don't drift apart from what it is meant to use for. It should create business value. It should help the humanity. It should help the community to progress overall. What's Snowflake's vision to kind of enable the entire Gen AI, LLMs from a data-driven technology perspective, as well as the overall utility for the ecosystem?
Snowflake to a certain extent is in an easier position because we provide business tools. And businesses are in the business of making money, and it's a constrained problem rather than the unconstrained world of like people generating any kind of content they want. I think AI does introduce scary elements in the consumer realm of potentially things like you cannot trust any voice you hear anymore because it could be AI generated. You cannot trust any video you see anymore because it could also be AI generated. It's going to be hard to tell like what is real and what is not. That's on the consumer side. On more of the business enterprise side where we play, I think there's a lot of work to be done, both in terms of how do you have better reasoning capability with models? How do you get them to be better at generating SQLs? Most of the benchmarks that are there are not very sophisticated benchmarks. I'll give you one example. I've met customers who have Snowflake deployments. They have multiple deployments, but they have individual deployments that have 100,000 tables. These are complex, sort of situations. So I think there's a lot of work to be done in terms of making language models better at SQL generation. There's a lot of work to be done in terms of making them better at what is called API calling, where they can actually call some other business function to get information about what they should be doing. So I think technology is very much in its infancy when it comes to business applications, but we think that by integrating it into the core of Snowflake, making it super easy to use, giving guidelines for how do you create safe applications, we can go a long way in harnessing the power of this technology to actually bring data to the fingertips of more people in more companies. We of course have an AI governance council within. Any models that we put out, we want to make sure that they're safe to use, that they don't generate abusive content. And I think that work needs to happen on an ongoing basis across everybody that is working in language models. And we see ourselves as important and responsible stewards there. But it's really like having our customers access data more easily, more freely, but also more safely in a reliable way that I think is the value that Snowflake as a company can bring to the data world.
Fantastic. On that note, thank you so much, Sridhar, for making the time. I think it was a wonderful conversation. I really like the succinct way you put things, and as well as the clarity in your thoughts in what you're building. So I'm very grateful that you could make the time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Thank you.